volgemaak. Moenie worry nie. Don't worry nie. I'm going to kick off and I'm going to sit there just now. Sorry, Gerda. Yeah, you know, and I wrote a little piece in the journal as well, where I say you've got to reflect and look back and see where the industry has been a few years ago. And, you know, when you do these kind of things, you sort of tend to give your age away. And bugger that, I'm going to do that anyway. So I think if you look back in the days when we all used endosulfan and then a few pyrethroids, and to what has happened now at the moment, then I think one must realize that the industry has really moved forward in leaps and bounds over a relatively short time. And if you measure this against some other industries, I think then it really becomes important how quick and how profound the movement in crop protection has been the last, I would say, 2 decades. It has really moved, I would say, from the Stone Age into what we have seen this morning. Gerda and a team and a team from ARC and other people, you know, when we started to work on crop protection, the first thing you did was to look what was happening outside. And I think at the moment, outside can come and have a look at what we're doing. I think the work that we're doing, the questions we are asking, really cuts to the bone. And before I stop talking, I just want to say, you know, if you look back in the last 10 or so years, there's 2 words that I would say come to mind. And the one is very obvious, and I think Gillian will probably say quite a bit about that later on, and that is sustainability. But one that came out, and I'm glad of the plenary this morning, I think one that's really important and that also defines the type of work that we do is partnerships. None of what we do here would have been possible without proper partnerships. And you know, it cuts wider. It's not just researchers versus the farmers. It's it's a chemical industry. It's academia. So with all that, I'm finished, and I'm going to put some of you guys on the spot. Frans, I'm going to sit now, but I'm going to ask you a question. We all know, and we have all seen what is happening in the last 2 years in the industry, and that is that the moths, I'm saying moths collectively, has become quite much more of an issue. France has a difficult orchard, and we've struggled with it for some time, and we've managed I would say, quite very good successes. Frans, can you please tell me what you've done?
Yeah, thank you, Schalk. That's a bit of a wide question. Yeah, I have 788s and 816, and it seems like all the pests love those varieties. So the 788s tend to flower very early. So I have almost full-size nuts already, and I'm just 20 k's from here, so I'm not in a hot area. My infestations start very early with the nut borer, and I really had trouble the past few years. And basically it came down to a decision to spray less. So I tried some other strategies. What I've done is I trained a guy to go through the orchard to look for nut borer eggs, and I'm sure by now you also know what it looks like, and it's amazing how much he gets. So we all know about sanitizing the orchard and so on. But you know, once there's a lot of fruit lying on the ground already, it's almost a bit too late. So I'm training him to look in the tree for those nuts with eggs on, and it's amazing how much he gets. And in the process, he also gets stink bug eggs. So he just squashes them, and to such an extent that my first stink bug spray last year was only the 15th of December. So in terms of, the cost for that guy, for his wages, I think it's really saved me a lot of money, because all my stink bug figures were below 2%, and I saved a lot of costs. And as I say, it was actually a decision to spray as little as possible. And unfortunately this year I have a lot of out-season nuts again, so there's a lot of nut borer. So I want to caution you guys that think you don't have a lot. As we have just heard, these things can multiply rapidly. So you might think you have a low infestation at the moment, but it can rapidly increase. There's a lot to say, Schalk, but I'll stand for now.
Yeah, Frans, I think from my side, what I can see that you've done on the farm that I think played a very big role, and I would like to hear, and I think it fits in with the previous talks as well, is your pruning was done well. We had a look at microbial control. We had a look at also at the releases of the trichogramma wasps, which actively hunt for these guys in the orchard. And then I don't know if I may, but Frans, if I may just say, maybe from where it has moved down to where it is now. Frans, do you mind if I say? When I started, if you do a nut count in the orchard, or a damage count in the orchard, you would 2 or 3 years ago we would get to, in January you would get to about a 20% level, which I regard as fairly high. This year I counted, Frans, it was under 4%. So I would regard that as commercial control, my honest opinion.
Thank you, Schalk. Thank you, Frans. I just want to add that Frans is touching on something that we are busy with, and some of you have already managed to attend some of these scouting courses. And this year we're really going out there training the scouts to look for the eggs, not only nut borer eggs, but also stink bug eggs.
Ja, toe Schalk by my aangekom het my gevra het of ek iets moet sê, toe sê ek sal my mening gee oor wat ons gedoen het hierdie paar vorige seisoen. En dankie dat hy my bietjie onder die bus ingegooi het, dis baie mense. Ons het laas jaar 'n IPM of 'n ligter spuitprogram getoets of weer toets. Want soos hulle sê, elke predator wat jy doodspuit se werk gaan jy oorvat. En ek dink ook die mense moet besef, as hulle daar's nog in die bietjie meer groener bestuur of doel wat mens het met 'n boord, gaan 'n mens 'n bietjie X persentasie aan sy hand hê. Daar is nog nie 'n silver bullet vir stinkbeeste in Suid-Afrika nie. Volgens my nou, dit is maar my opinie. En ek bedoel, die wêreld se beste boere sit hierso. So toe vra hy vir my, wat is ons benadering ook, so min as moontlik spuit. Ons spuitprogram is maar basies, ons doen nie eintlik na seisoen 'n clean-up spray nie. Ons eerste bespuiting sal begin seker so as die eerste neute so ertjie grootte is. En dan doen ons maar ons weeklikse dichlorofos scoutings, hou die populasie so dop. En as ons spuit, dan spuit ons effektief, soos wat ons nou die vorige spreker gesien het, mens moet maar heel effektief spuit en die populasie af te bring, en dan kan 'n mens paar weke wegkom, en te goeie tyd, party weke moet jy 2-3 weke na jou eerste bespuiting moet jy maar weer opvolg. Ons het al tot 12 weke weggekom. En dan ons laaste bespuiting sal wees om en by, as ons begin ethapon spuit, ons hou daarvan om ethapon saam, of insekdoder saam met ons ethapon in te sit, veral met die laaste bespuiting. En ja, dis maar wat ons doen.
Wouter, many thanks. I think what is important, and those of you that know me would know that I would keel over if somebody asked me for a spray program. I think what both Wouter and Frans showed is not a spraying program, but a spraying strategy. And there's a huge difference between the two. And I think this is also what Elsje was trying to talk to you about, is that we got to know what's happening in the orchard. And I think in future, a lot of what IPM is nothing less than knowledge. You got to gather knowledge and then make sound decisions on top of that. I think in both cases, my honest opinion is that a considerable amount of pesticide and normal chemical savings has been made, and control has not been forfeited. So I think the two is not mutually exclusive. It can work. If we can move on, I would like to put Gerda on the spot. Gerda, one of the questions that I think a lot of people in the audience here are sitting at a burning question, and I'm sorry to putting you on the spot, but there's been, the flowering is just finished, and there's a lot of questions as to what, I just talked about the insect strategy, as to what strategy we should follow regarding the flower disease control. I think the diseases are totally different from insects, so you've got to look at a different approach. And some of the farmers have asked me, now, if I don't spray this season, what would happen next season? I probably won't lose a crop, or depending on the severity, I probably won't lose much this season, but won't have inoculum build-up for the next season. Following on that, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. Following on that, a lot of guys would ask, now, when should you decide to spray? Our recommendations is, if you see cloudy weather coming on, get your sprays on. But I would like to hear your comments, please. Thanks, Gerda.
Thanks, Schalk. Maybe before, I wanted to just say something about nutball or FCM. I think if growers are willing to look for the eggs, it's really worthwhile, because the one-year trial that actually did clearly showed that some of the trials or the traps for interpreting your delta traps can be misleading. I'm not saying to not use them, but we often find so many different species there, so they're not always 100% indication of what is really in your orchard. So doing eggs as well is important.
Sorry, Gerda, maybe just before, on that subject, I think it's important. One of the students in Nelspruit that worked as well picked, and I'm sure you guys did as well, picked up about 8 or 9 different species of moths in macadamias, and I do agree. If you look at what other countries are doing, we do egg counts, and I think this is absolutely the way forward. My honest opinion. So, sorry, Gerda.
Yes, and then now the more complicated things. So in terms of the flower blight or complex, specifically if we focus on new Lathyopsis species, we've now done our second year of monitoring. So one side I think that needs to be answered is, what do we really understand about flowering? So if you think about the work that Zander and Mary's doing, we have some genomes. What do we understand about those genes? If you think about the different cultivars, so exactly what are the triggers, when are they switched on? So can we understand flowering or flowering time a little bit better? Gerard and Baden, I'm not going to say myself, for the last 2 years, I think the last 6 weeks, they were here in Nelspruit every week, so driving from Pretoria. But if we look at our data from last week, I think flowers were at least almost 3 weeks earlier, okay? And we thought that maybe in terms of dry flower, we passed everything. Typically, we think if there's ovary swelling, so where there's just nut safe, your nuts are safe. But what we saw on our last visit, that seems to not be the case. So the question is, what is triggering the dry flower or the new Lathyopsis to all of a sudden start growing? I think what Femi and his student Prasnat have done is a good start, but potentially it's not just that temperature. How many days does it need? And that's why I know I think both Marietta and I wanted to do sort of a spore study. And so I think it's great Marietta's looking at the spore, so what is in the orchard, and hopefully we can get some answers on when do you see them present in the tissue. And then in terms of build-up, we would actually, although we're going to finish the project, we'd like to have a number of years of data. So if you say you don't spray, can we then come and collect those old seams, and we can actually do a meta-barcoding study to understand what is really there and what's not there. So I don't think I have an answer, but I think hopefully with what we are trying to get done from the work that was done in Australia, building to, it's about that timing and understanding when the fungus, maybe it's already there, but what is that trigger that starts? And maybe when we thought ovary swelling, we're on the safe side, it doesn't seem to be this season. Just on the farms we visited yesterday, there was definitely some of the nuts that also dried out. So it's not your typical flower collapse that you'll just see after a rainy weather. I think that's definitely also then perhaps dry flower.
Okay, thanks, Gerda. I think before we step on to I'm going to allow a few questions before the AGM. Sorry, there's a question. Stefan. Yeah, Gerda, you want to answer that? Should I answer? Strategy
Can you
with
repeat?
strategy with nut borer. If you count the eggs, what do you do with that?
So if you're willing to count moth eggs, what then?
Can I relate to the consultants or the farmers that's sitting on that side? I was just saying that looking at eggs as well is important.
Dankie, Stefan. Very, very good point. We have to have a strategy that informs our decision after we've monitored, right? So dit help veel jy moniteer, maar jy weet nie wat gaan jy doen wanneer jy nou 'n druppelwaarde oorskry nie. En ek dink Frans het 'n baie goeie voorbeeld gehad van byvoorbeeld wespes vrylaat. So wanneer jy die eiers gesien het, het jy wespes vrygelaat, maar dit beteken jy moet jou stinkbesie strategie aanpas. Want ons kan nie nou die wespes gaan doodspuit nadat ons hulle vrygelaat het. So it helps to know what your strategy is, and there are many ways to kill a cat. And if we say nut borer eggs, how do we kill it? We know that trichogramma works, and we know that methoxyphenazide works.
Elsje, you're touching on an extremely important subject, and I think this is part of my opening remarks. Is that we do not have an option but to integrate at the moment. We all, unfortunately, are painfully aware of what's happening with the felted cosset in the area. And we all know that we are importing a parasitoid from Hawaii for the guy. And I can tell you now that if we are going to start spraying the way we do, the way we apply normal sprays for sting bugs, which are broad spectrum products, we are just going to kill this parasite. So while we are working, and it's going to take probably about 5 years getting the permission to release the parasite, I think it's important that we must really look at integrating other systems into a softer, more biological approach as possible. So we got a bit of time, but not a lot. Elsje, with that, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask one of the insects that probably, I would say, causes more debate than the current politics in the country are thrips. What is your opinion? I've been to orchards where the guys don't spray and they get good yields, and then I've been to orchards where the guys do spray and they get good yields. Yeah, and I know you've done quite a bit of work on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Schalk. On the former, not spraying and getting very good yields, we know that thrips contribute to pollination. It's been proven. We know that thrips is not all bad, but it depends in what climate zone and what's the numbers. So currently we're sitting with a very small flush on young trees, and end of September did result in quite a flare-up in thrips numbers in some of the drier climate zones. So what we've seen is when you keep on controlling the thrips, keeping the numbers down, you retain your flush. And that is where I need to focus.
And the link between flower diseases, do you think there's a link?
Yes, I do think that there's a link. And just to add on to the flower diseases, I think if it's there, you can use the models that Gerda alluded to. There's published models that we can apply by integrating. And this one model that we're looking at is using vapor pressure deficit. And VPD can really predict your, let's call it disease risk. And if you know that you're in an area with a high disease risk, I would really go in and treat preventatively.
I think we've got a few minutes. I maybe would like to allow some questions if anyone really has a pressing question.
Hi, Elsje. You spoke about the thrip damaging your flush. Has the thrip got any effect on the nuts now as they stand, but smaller than pea size? Can they cause abscission, or is it just a cosmetic damage, or can it affect the size of your nut?
Thanks very much for that. There's a group of students by Chris Weldon, the University of Pretoria. They are currently looking at that. So not only identifying the thrips that causes damage after nut set, but also the result of nut drop because of the thrips being there. They identify the species, they count the larvae and the adults separate, and then hope to relate it to something that makes sense to us in terms of whether or not we should be worried. They're also looking at a secondary infection because of that damage of thrips. I'm sure all of you have seen that sugar droplet after set, and we're worried that that might be a secondary infection point for a disease.
More questions? Stefan, sorry, yeah. I'll keep hearing.
Excuse me, I have many questions now. Maybe this one to Adele. We sometimes see MRLs picked up of phosphonates in blocks that were not treated with phosphonates ever. What else could be the contamination?
Yeah, Stefan, that's a difficult question. The only thing that I know, we've seen it in apples and avos as well. But I've also spoke to Liz Dan in Australia. We really don't know where that residue comes from. My only guess could be that some of the fertilizers that are being used unknowingly contains it.
Are we testing for the phosphonate group specifically, because glyphosate and ethipon both carry the same phosphonate group?
We are testing specifically for phosphite. We use the same analytical method for our root phosphite than for the, that the labs use for the fruit residues. And it definitely, we checked, it only detects the residue breakdown from phosphite, which it can differentiate from glyphosate.
More questions? Sorry, here's one. Yes, one, sorry. Sorry, light was in my eyes. I didn't see you.
Morning, mine is more of a comment, but there's a smaller question. I would like to commend this team for taking diseases and biosecurity in their own industry, as is causing havoc in the livestock industry, as we can see. Exports market are being closed. One of the student research, she mentioned that they are going to identify a different host for steam bug. I just wanted to ask, how is that going to be done? Is there a different tree, or are you going to plant the trees in between the macadamia nuts? Thanks.
Okay, yes, so that was Tembeka's research project. So obviously, just briefly again, when you think about it, we're looking at the gut and looking for what plant DNA we can detect, anything that's not macadamia. And so yes, there we have options. So Elisa has developed a alarm pheromone. If you think about a control strategy, you can use it in a push-pull system. So you can put the alarm in the orchard, but you need something that pulls it out. So if we have a really good alternative host, you can plant that at a perimeter that can be used in the, pulling it out of the orchard. Potentially we can think of what are the volatiles of that plant that the stink bug are attracted to. I want to say it might be difficult, but if you really understand the alternative hosts where they breed specifically, because they do lay eggs in the orchard, but they also know it, they come in as adults, is there a potential way that you can control them there? But maybe not, but the whole idea with thinking in terms of a push-pull strategy, or what's also nice is you can plant them as like indicator plants. So it's a way that you can monitor. You now see a lot of bugs on this tree or whatever it is. It tells you there's bugs. I know for us at the fruit spotting bog in Australia, they have these species available, and it actually works quite well in terms of just telling you the bug in the area.
Yeah, in Australia, they've actually planted clusters of trees. Murraya paniculata, I believe, is one of the...
Spotting bog, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, they planted that and they use that as indicator plants. So that's part of it. I think once you have alternative host plants, you can, it opens up a lot of doors for in terms of environmental friendly management. I think I will allow a last question, and then we have to break for the AGM. Sorry, there's one here. Sorry. Maybe use one of these mics. Oh, don't worry, they got it.
Thank you. I would like to pose a question based on the thrift side. As farmers, if we look at the good side of the thrift or the benefits of it, but will there be a control measure in future that will allow us to keep them for the good benefit, but them not harming our crop?
It's a difficult question.
Schalk sê dalk gaan net weer, ek het nog nie gevolg nie.
Let's see if I have it right. So you say, but Elsje said that thrips have also a beneficial effect, but also a detrimental effect, and you want to sort of to find a midway in between.
To know when.
Yeah, to know when and where. So that's quite that's not an easy question.
Yeah, it's a hard question, but I think the key lies in knowing when certain pests do damage. So you have to study the phenology of your trees, right? Because we know that the thrips do damage on the young flush when you've planted young trees. We know that thrips do damage on some farms in some areas on the young flowers. That's still closed. Okay, but it was definitely not true for all the farms. It was definitely not true for all the climate zones. So it is all about the when. And if you can start monitoring the phenology, you know which pests pose risk at different phenological stages. And then you can go in and intervene very soon so that you don't have to really get in there with harsh interventions. But if you start integrating and you start off soft, there is a way to control them.
Guys, we have to move on. I would like to thank from SAMAC side. I would like to thank the panel members and the Wouter and Frans, especially you guys. I know you don't like to be here, but thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And I think let's give them a hand, please, guys.